So the championship has finally arrived, the season that started way back in the first week of September. And we've got, hopefully, a good game with Clemson and Alabama tonight. I don't think it's going to be like Penn State and USC in the Rose Bowl. I hope it is. And I'm going to talk about the total here in the second. And I promise today I will not talk about the grabber, even though I think it certainly has entertained you folks over the past couple of days. Hi, everyone. DeMarco here. I'll tell you what, for a guy who's supposedly getting better every time I look at this video, here on my computer, I see myself in the screen. I don't look like I'm getting better if you ask me, but doctors say I am, so I guess I'll trust their opinion. But listen, Wildcard Weekend is passed, and all four teams, all four favorites covered. Who would have thunk that, right? And in retrospect, it's easy to say this after the fact, but there are two games in particular that I want to talk about. And, I think as a gambler, not as a handicapper, but as a gambler, there is absolutely no way going into this weekend and coming out of this weekend that you possibly could have bet the Raiders or the Dolphins. You bet Houston and you bet Pittsburgh, or you don't bet those games at all. You lose with the Texans, or you lose with the Steelers, or you don't bet those games at all. Because betting the Raiders or betting the Dolphins, fool's gold. Raiders for obvious reasons, because, come on, seriously, what would you be doing betting Oakland with Connor Cook at quarterback? And the Dolphins, if you got my analysis on Miami yesterday, listen, if you were willing to invest money with that team, with that defense, the way they had collapsed down the stretch after giving up 389 yards and 30-some points at home in a game that had significance to Tom Brady and the Patriots, after giving up over 500 and some yards on the road and 31 points in a game that they were lucky to survive because Rex Ryan was a moron at Buffalo, well, that was fool's gold as well. So again, the other two games, listen, Seattle, Detroit, okay, you could make a case for betting the Lions, especially, with the way they were the comeback kids throughout this season. But then again, as I pointed out in the video report on Saturday, a Lions team that faded down the stretch. And the Green Bay, New York game, hey, listen, when the Packers went and punted the first 5 possessions yesterday, it looked good, right? When the Giants took the 6-0 lead. And if Brett Favre. Oh, God, it must be the drugs. If Aaron Rodgers doesn't hit that Hail Mary pass, who knows how the complexion of that game changes. And one more thing about the games yesterday and this weekend as well. Listen, even before the Pittsburgh game yesterday, and even though I made money, and you did too yesterday if you happen to follow my play and my advice on betting Pittsburgh yesterday, even before that game was played yesterday, I happen to personally agree with Terry Bradshaw in his opinion about Mike Tomlin. I never thought he was that much of a good coach. I never think that he wins big road games. I think that his success in Pittsburgh is more a byproduct of Ben Roethlisberger getting the job done than his coaching genius. And I look at that game yesterday, and I just don't understand. I don't understand when you're up 18 points and that game is done with 5.5 minutes to play. What's Ben Roethlisberger doing out there? And I expounded on this fact. If you happen to read my homepage today, you got Mr. Brittle and Roethlisberger, the linchpin of your team's success if you have any intention of going further in the playoffs. What is he still doing out on the field? I don't get it. Listen, every single one of these coaches in preseason play in August will talk about why they don't want to expose their starters, in particular the quarterbacks, to extensive playing time in meaningless preseason games. And the reality is that they don't want to be criticized should one of their key players, and particularly the quarterbacks, get hurt in a meaningless preseason games, even though statistically the odds are still 50-50 for them getting hurt in a meaningless preseason game as opposed to getting hurt in the very first snap of the first week's regular season game. Statistically, the odds are exactly the same because they open themselves up for criticism in the meaningless preseason game as opposed to the guy breaking his leg on the first snap of the regular season game. What's the difference then in having a guy out there with an 18-point lead with 5.5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter of a game in week 1 of the wild card? I don't get it. And really, let's take it a step further. What was Russell Wilson? A guy whose season was just filled with injuries in the first 10 weeks. What was he out there with Pete Carroll with that game in hand? What was Aaron Rodgers doing out there with the Packers up big? The Giants weren't coming back in the fourth quarter. What, you had to throw 2 more touchdown passes? Didn't Mike McCarthy see what happened when you lost Jordy Nelson on 1 play in the first quarter in that game? So now the rest of the week, we're going to hear updates on Ben Roethlisberger's ankle every single day, because that's going to influence everything about the Steelers' playoff fates and fortunes for the rest of this week going into the game with Kansas City. And listen, we can talk about how good the Packers are going to be against Dallas, how they're a much better team going into this rematch against Dallas than they were in the first go-round when the Cowboys bludgeoned them at Lambeau. Although has a run defense really gotten significantly better than when at home? Zeke Elliott ran for 157 yards. Has their secondary gotten much better than when Dak Prescott ripped them to shreds? And let's remember a year ago how the Packers, and especially Aaron Rodgers, struggled when Jordy Nelson wasn't in the lineup. Now, I don't know at the time of this update whether or not he broke ribs, if he's going to play or not. But they're not going to be the same offense. And I don't care what they say that Randall Cobb had a great game yesterday and they'll compensate if Jordy Nelson can't play. They are not the same team without his security blanket. He is that little blue blanket to Linus and the Peanuts cartoons. That's what Jordy Nelson is to Aaron Rodgers. So again, we'll talk more about the divisional round playoffs as the week progresses. But let's talk about this little game here tonight. The total is 50.5. Do I think it's going to be 45-40 like last year? No, but I think it's going to go over the total because, listen, Clemson's not intimidated. Clemson gave Alabama all they could handle last year. This is a seasoned team. They're not intimidated by big, bad Alabama. At the same time, I think that Nick Saban, who to me is the equivalent of Andy Reid in the college ranks, a guy who is just a little too conservative at times, he knows from last year. This is a guy who, remember, rather than giving Deshaun Watson one more chance, rather than putting faith in that great defense that he had a year ago, rather than giving Deshaun Watson one more chance, elected to go for an onside kick, which he recovered, thankfully, last year to seal that win in the championship game. He knows he's got to put points on the board as well. He was not happy with the conservative nature and the play calling of Lane Kiffin, which is one of the reasons he made the change in the offensive coordinator job. And he was not happy with the performance of his team offensively in the 24-7 win against Washington. So I think he knows as well that he's got to open it up here in this game. I think that Clemson is not going to put 40 points on the board. I don't think Deshaun Watson's going to throw for 400 and have a big game like he did last year. But Deshaun Watson also has Mike Williams this year, and he didn't have that weapon in his arsenal a year ago. I think that this Clemson defense, although good, is not as good as last year's team, and last year's team gave up 45 points, okay? I think Jalen Hurts will definitely be better than he was against Washington because I think, listen, he's a freshman, and that was his first big game performance. He got the jitters, and I think that with that game under his belt, he'll play a little more confident tonight. And I think also they'll get him a little more involved in the flow of the offense by using his mobility because he's a much more effective passer when he runs the ball earlier in the game. That frees him off, and it also allows the defenses not to collapse on the pocket and plays a little straight up and plays a little more honest. So, do I think that this game will have 85 points scored? No. But sitting around 51 points, I can certainly see this game have 60, 63, 64 points scored. So I think the over is the way to go. Listen, we have seen this Clemson defense not play great. Remember that back and forth game with Louisville, the back and forth game with Pittsburgh. This is a team that can be the back and forth game with Florida State. This is a game that is susceptible to be run on. And I'm sure that Alabama, after the big running game that they had from Scarborough against Washington, is going to come out here and try to establish the tempo and on the ground. And I'm sure with Hurts, again, they're going to try to run the ball from the quarterback position too. So again, I think the over is the way to go. And that's the way I'm going to play it tonight. Good luck, everybody. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.